and welcome to the show. This is Everything Under the Sun. My name is Ty. Hope all of you are doing well. Hope you had a fantastic week. Mine has been pretty alright. It's been pretty good. My birthday just passed. It was on Sunday, this Sunday that just passed. So it was pretty good. I mean, birthday weekend was kind of mellow compared to previous years, but as I kind of get older, I kind of get out of that phase of just getting super trashed all weekend or all month or all week or whatever whatever I decide to do for that birthday. But it was definitely like a birthday full of just a lot of reflection. Had a lot of time to think about just things that I want for myself, things I want for the future, things that I want to kind of start incorporating. There are those things that we want to do for ourselves, things that we want to do in our lives, and maybe we've held on to these like passions or ideas or like things that we've wanted to start doing, and we've kind of put it off for different reasons. And I have those things just like many of us, many other people have those things. And I guess in that time of reflecting and thinking about things I want, I'm like, I think it's time that I start embarking on that adventure. I think I should start, moving towards those things that I feel that, I've always wanted, but maybe didn't want to put the time towards because, I thought it was a lot of energy, or maybe, basically the things that like I've spoken about in this podcast where, it's just the motivation, the drive, the feeling as though, maybe it won't happen as I want it to happen. So, we're all in this journey. We all go through these different situations that we feel this, kind of pull towards something more. And I think that that's something that we should all start moving towards when we feel the time is right. Like if you feel like this is the time where you should just relax and get back to yourself, or do whatever you need to do. Like do what you need to do, listen to yourself and feel what that is telling you, but always acknowledge that thing that's pulling you, that thing that feels like it's going to be something that's really good for you, because more than likely if it's been staying with you for all this time, then it's probably going to be something that's really just amazing for what you want for yourself. So listen to that, give that attention. But also, like, if you're on that other end where you're like, I recognize that, but I'm also like just really tired. Maybe you just finished a semester at school. Maybe you have a job that's just really demanding, and like you have other things that you want to kind of put your attention towards in that moment. Do that, but always acknowledge that there is that thing that you want. And I think that as that passion burns, as that kind of like flame stays lit, then it's always going to be something that you're going to try to move towards in different aspects. Like that flame's going to get a little hotter, you're going to start feeling that heat a little more, and you may start getting that feeling that, hey, I want to start going towards this thing. So anyway, great birthday weekend. I obviously did a lot of reflection on the object of, or the concept of growth and just expansion, and I've loved that. So this is a year like no other, and I expect it to be something really amazing. So I appreciate everyone that's reached out. And my friend made me this card. It's a birthday card, and I tagged it on the Instagram. I tagged the podcast page on the post. So I have like my own personal podcast page, and there's the podcast page. I have my own personal Instagram page, and the podcast page is separate. So I tagged the podcast on my post from my personal page. So you can see the card on the tagged post on the podcast page, but it's a birthday card, but it's the everything under the sun, emblem, like with the sun and the circles in the sun and the guy on fire at the bottom, and I don't know, just really amazing. So I can see that it took some time, and I don't know, it always makes me feel special when there's time put into things like that. Like you don't have to like buy me things, you don't have to do anything like that, although like I did get gifts that were purchased. But it's like just that shows so much, and like I love it. So I have it like sitting on like my little mantle thing. But yeah, so birthday weekend was good. The reflection on just everything in life was really amazing, and got to kind of talk about some new ideas in the work. So one of those new things that I'm moving towards, and it's not something that I necessarily planned on doing, but it's part of that whole expansion thing, and like just moving towards bigger things. And this is an idea that my friend actually had to start another podcast, actually. So There may be another podcast coming out. It's not going to be replacing this podcast. It's just going to be another podcast where you'll hear my voice and the voice of someone else, and it's going to be a collaborative thing where we kind of speak about some more aspects of life, but in a different light. So there's going to be more details on that to come, but I will keep you posted on that, and it should be just a cool podcast, to speak about some new things, maybe dive into some deeper topics that maybe were briefly covered here, but something that's a little more intricate maybe, and also the company of someone else, where it's like you're not just gonna hear my voice, it's gonna be someone else, and it's gonna be kind of a different vibe. So stay tuned for that. I will give more details about that when the name and the direction that we want to go in is kind of planned out a little more. But it was kind of just discussed over this past weekend, and we've kind of been playing around with the idea for a little bit. But this weekend was kind of just like, okay, yeah, I think like we should kind of like get going on this. So that may be something that's coming up. So look forward to that, and I will of course keep you posted with that. But anyway, to get this going already, gonna shake this box up and see what we got for the topic for next week, and send those topics in everything.sunpodcast@gmail.com. If you have anything that you'd like to speak about, if you'd like to even hear a follow-up, you can email that into everything.sunpodcast@gmail.com. And I just love hearing feedback from all of the people listening. So the next topic that I just drew is language. Idiomas in Spanish is what that is. But language is so crazy. I was just speaking about this in the last episode about influence, how we speak the language we do because we are influenced by our environment, and we're speaking language of which we were raised around. Like it doesn't matter like where you're originally from. If you grew up in a country that speaks one language, like you are going to speak that language. So language is so interesting. It's so dynamic, and it's very interesting the way that we use it for communication and the different ways that we have language, because we have spoken language, we have body language, and I think we can learn a lot about what people mean based on not just the words that they say. So I think that language is going to be an interesting topic. I'm not really sure where I'm going to go with it, but my mind's kind of just going different places as I kind of think about it. So topic for next week is going to be languages, so that should be or language. So that should be interesting. The topic for this week is judgment. And as I thought about this topic, I thought about this topic a lot, and since I pulled it, it was kind of just something that I just didn't know. I didn't know how to go about speaking about it, because just like influence, where I spoke about in the last episode about influence, I feel as though judgment is something that is it's a part of life. It's something that's always constant. And although we're always told, don't judge, like you shouldn't judge people or things like that, there's also like those sayings where it's like use your judgment. It's like judgment is something that's like it's ingrained in every aspect of our life. And I don't believe that like judgment necessarily is bad, but I believe that the problem is the way that we judge, how we judge. And because I mean, like, okay, like I said, judgment is going to be something that's constantly pervasive in our lives. So it's a matter of how we're doing this thing that's going to be around no matter what. How are we bringing this into the world, and how is it coming back to ourselves? Because believe it or not, I mean, many of us have experienced this where we felt judgment from others. So, like this is something that's constantly perpetuating, and whether that's judgment in a good way, where someone's like judging you based on how nice your outfit is, versus, someone judging you based on, the religion that you have, or the color of your skin, or, your sexual orientation, whatever it is, there's judgment that's being spewed out. So there has to be some kind of understanding of, how we're using judgment. And it can be in so many subtle ways that we're judging each other. And so I went online to look at the definition of judgment, because, I didn't want it to be like, I think a few episodes ago I gave the definition of something. I think it was the last episode I gave like a just out there definition of influence, and I'm pretty sure I used the word influence in the definition itself. So I mean, it wasn't a Google definition, it wasn't something I went on Webster. It was more or less a definition based on my understanding of it, which influence. I think we can all give like maybe a similar definition of what influence is, but that's neither here nor there. This time I went to Google and I actually got the definition of judgment. And this is something that like also makes it clear that this is something that's pervasive in our life, just judgment in itself being something that's just a constant thing in our life, something that's always going to be there. So this is the definition. Judgment is the ability to make considered decisions or come to sensible conclusions. And I broke that down a little bit more because, like, of course, like, to make considered decisions, like, what does that even mean? So, to make a considered decision, considered means to think carefully about something. So, if you're thinking carefully about a decision that you're making, that's, like, okay, that's using, I guess, good judgment in this, or that's just the definition of judgment. That's thinking carefully about a decision. So when we pass judgment on someone else or some situation, is it something that we're thinking carefully about? And also, or come to a sensible conclusion using our sensibility, using the things that we know, maybe moralities and different things to decide what we want to do next. And I think that as we have judgment in the world, this pervasive thing that's happening, that negative aspect of judgment, that negative aspect of the judgment that goes out from us sometimes, or the judgment that comes in towards us, it's something that is not necessarily well thought out, or not in my opinion, because I feel as though, unless the intention is to hurt someone or to make them feel bad, then maybe it's thought out in that way. But at the end of the day, I think that as we think about just judgment itself, or as I think about judgment itself, I think judgment comes from the preconceived notions that we have of how life is. And something I'm going to get to in a little bit later, but I guess I'll speak about it now, but it's just to consider that there is a relativity to all truths, where it's like, you can have your truth, you can have the things that you believe in, whether it's like religiously or about life or about what people should be doing or how we should live. Like that's a truth for you. That's a truth in your life. And as we think about others or move throughout the world, if we only consider our view to be right, if we only consider our judgment of the world to be right, then we're going to place negative judgment on anyone that opposes that. And that's where we fall into that aspect of maybe doing something unintentionally that is not really well thought out. Because if we really put ourselves in someone else's shoes, like, that person grew up maybe in a different country, maybe they speak a different language, maybe they have a different culture, a different religion, a different view on life, different judgments that they place in their, lexicon, or in their, like, little mindset. Not like little mindset, but but they place in their mindset. And like, that's their judgment of the world. And like, we each have our own judgments, and that is our own truths. And we can't tell someone else that their truth is wrong. I mean, I guess you can, but it's like running against a brick wall. It's like you can't break someone's foundation down and then try to build them up in your image. That doesn't work that way. So as we go throughout the world, as we move throughout the world, keep mind that everyone has their own truths, everyone moves in their own way. So as you go towards someone else, like, someone's idea of beauty can be different than yours. So don't tell them that, oh, that looks really strange, that looks like that's not beautiful, because what is beautiful to you may not be beautiful to them, and what's beautiful to them may not be beautiful to you. So know that, and don't pass judgment in a negative way based on your own view of the world. And I think that's where, again, like, that problem lies in how we judge, because judgment is going to be something that's there, but how we judge, how are we judging? Are we coming to sensible conclusions about the things around us? Are we coming to considered decisions that we're thinking very carefully about as we pass these judgments towards other people or other situations? Because judgment comes in different domains. It comes from other people, it comes from places, it comes from things, it comes from so many different situations. And a lot of times that comes down to us and how we're interpreting things and how we're putting things out. Like, we can pass judgment on other people's, like I spoke about. We can pass judgment on other people based on their looks, based on, like, where they come from, how they dress, and that can come right back to us. And it doesn't feel good when it comes back to us. And something that I also, like, when I looked up judgment when I was looking at Google. There was a question of why is judgment bad? And the answer to that question was it creates limitations. So I completely agree with that. Where I was just speaking about the judgment passed on to others, it comes back to us. And this kind of explanation of this answer, it was speaking about essentially how it creates limitations in the sense that if we go out into a situation, let's say like it's like a party or something, in some kind of social situation or some kind of situation that we have the ability to be judged, we will feel as though we're being judged because we put that judgment out on others. We have this critical view or this critical lens on the world where we pass those judgments, and that's part of how we move through the world. So it's going to be how we think about the world as well. If you're passing judgment on other people and it's very critical, then you're going to be critical with yourself about how you're dressed, how you look, how you express yourself in different domains because you're going to feel like you're being judged. So the more judgment that you put out into the world, the more judgment you're going to feel is coming from the outside world, and it may not even be the case. So we add this strain to ourselves when we create this judgment because it's this perpetuating thing. So it does create limitations in our lives in that way where we can't even enjoy situations that we would normally enjoy because we're so critical of the world, and therefore we feel as though the world is critical of us. So it doesn't do anyone in judgment as we pass judgment to others or other situations, because that critical lens is going to kind of be reflected back to us in that mental state. And that's where there's that judgment that comes within ourselves where now we don't even we don't just see that or feel as though the outside world is judging us critically. Within our own mind, we are creating these narratives, we're creating these stories of judgment that's being passed on us. So now we look bad on ourselves, we look down on ourselves because of the way that we look or the way that we act or how we express ourselves. And it creates a bad feeling within us. Like it creates something that doesn't feel good because it feels like parts of ourselves, like the parts of ourselves that we want to express, are being stifled or being told are wrong or bad. And that's something that is a big issue with social media where, there is that expression of, like talents and skills and, amazing beauty and stuff like that in the world. But there's also that aspect on the other end where people are falling into that, idea where it's like we see that model, or like, like the Instagram models and things like that. And they have this kind of body type or this kind of lifestyle or whatever it is, like something that is like very just different than what is, kind of the average person deals with or experiences. So it seems like it's this kind of like unrealistic ideal, but it's something that everyone is trying to move towards where, even if this person, doesn't normally look like that or doesn't normally act this way, you see them posting things on Instagram or on Snapchat or whatever it is that reflects this type of image that's being put out there. And I mean, of course, some people can, work their way and like get to this kind of weird ideal of how we should, and I see that in air quotes, how we should look or how we should act in these different ways. But there are a lot of people that don't want to change their body in that way, that don't want to change their life in that way, where it's like we shouldn't have to change the way that we feel about ourselves or who we are within ourselves because of the things that are being put out there or kind of put into the world. But those are the internal judgments that we start to create within ourselves, where if we are very critical of looks or, how things are in the world, which is something that a lot of people are actually struggling with. I mean, I watched that documentary, The Social Dilemma, and I think that a lot of those kind of ideas about social media are coming from that. So you can watch that yourself if you'd like to. And I mean, I think there's definitely a lot just speaking about that idea of just social media and how it can create this kind of negative image of self for the individuals that are kind of just, being a normal, beautiful, average person, So there's just so much influence that's being happen that happens, like in influence and judgment. I think is kind of just interesting that they were drawn back to back in that way, because I do feel as though there is a very just immediate connection between the two, where it's like social media influencers are, putting themselves out there, and it's creating this intrinsic judgment within the selves of the people that are, viewing this content. And that's kind of where that dilemma of, that internal judgment comes in. It's where it's like, how are we seeing the world and how are we seeing ourselves in relation to that? And I mean, it's okay to acknowledge that someone is beautiful, but also acknowledge that you are beautiful. It's like their beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and like that's not just a saying because it's, a saying. It's because like that's the truth. And just like all truths are relative, like beauty is, it's a truth and it's a relativity. It's, I don't know why I say it that way, but, and it's a relativity. So, you know, as we look at the world, we can acknowledge that, oh, wow, that looks like a really great lifestyle. Wow, that looks like a really, great whatever it is. But I feel as though when we think too critically about that and when we start looking at the world through that lens, then we start looking at ourselves through that lens and pinpointing different problems that we've kind of just created because of this judgment, again, that's coming externally. So judgment is the cyclical thing. And as we consider judgment, kind of closing thoughts, as we consider judgment, just consider again that your truth is your truth and someone else's truth is their truth. And understand that, like use that to make a considered decision and to come to a sensible conclusion about things, like don't just say things, don't just do things because you feel as though that's right for you. Think about it, like use different aspects. And if something is completely something that you don't agree with, then that's okay. Like know that that's okay and that you don't have to agree with that because you're not that person. If that person is like influencing your life in some kind of way, then remove them from your life. But at the end of the day, it's like we have no place to place judgment in someone else's life based on the truth that they live by. And that's kind of something that we must consider as we think about this idea of judgment. It's not going to go away. It's not going to just evaporate, but we can control how we use it and how we utilize it and how it influences us, because again, it turns into the cycle, this negative cycle of just people hurting other people and it coming internally and it just like regurgitating externally on other people, and it's just this bad cycle. So be mindful of just the words that you say and how you come across to other people, and also how you treat yourself, the judgment that you place on yourself, because at the end of the day, it's like we must love ourselves because we are constantly with ourselves. We are the ones that are 100% of the time with ourselves. So be kind to yourself and understand those places where judgment is kind of wreaking havoc in your life, and try to, ameliorate those things and by different means, So, I mean, I think that's not like really the best way to say how to eliminate bad judgment, but I think that that's kind of just something that you have to use your judgment for. I don't know the situations, how you live your life or anything like that, so use your judgment to realize how you're using your judgment. So that's all I got for this. I hope all you're doing well. I said that in the beginning. I hope this was something good to listen to. If you have any ideas, thoughts, or additions that you like to add to this, or add any topics or anything like that, send those to everything.sunpodcast@gmail.com. You can join the Instagram page at everything.sunpodcast. You can join the Twitter page at everysunpodcast, or you can join the Facebook group at Everything Under the Sun with Ty. And yeah, that's all I got. So love you all, and I will see you next time.